I'm Alyssa Whetstone. I'm an art teacher, painter, and drawer, and today we're going to be working on an exercise to practice our composition, or the arrangement of the pieces in our paintings or artworks. It's going to look a little bit something like this. We're going to work with circles and lines to practice arranging and making sure our artwork is balanced and improve our technique with watercolor paint. So let's get started.
All right, we're gonna do an exercise together using some circles, some lines to practice working on composition, which is how things are arranged, and design and color and all the good stuff. So today I'm using a 5x7 piece of paper, so it's nice and small. To me, it's less intimidating to have a small piece of paper. This paper is 100% cotton, which is what you wanna use with watercolor. This is hot press, which means it has a little bit of a texture to it, which is good for abstract and texture and things like that. If you wanted to paint something super realistic, you'd want cold press, which is much smoother. I use those when doing like specific landscapes or cityscapes, especially where there are smooth industrial buildings. For today, either one, cold press or hot press, will work. I'll be using a flathead brush or square brush. I don't know what the technical name is. It's got a square flat end, and probably a small skinny little brush as well. So any really size will do, but the square is going to be really helpful for making our circles, which you might think is strange, but I promise it works. Now, when you're working, I suggest using some tape to keep your paper in place. It just prevents you from having to shift it and move it or accidentally touching the wet paint on top of it. You can paint and press down all the edges. What I'm going to do today is literally just use some rolls of tape and put it on the back of the paper to just keep it from moving around. If you want to tape the whole edges, you sure can. This is just one way to keep it. I can't bump it from moving or anything like that. And since I'm not painting the whole paper, I don't need those edges to be completely flat. I would want them to be completely flat if I was filling the paper with water and I didn't want it to ripple or move around. So, got my paper taped down. Let's think about colors that you want to use. You're going to want to pick a group of analogous colors. I have this really handy dandy color wheel from the Gray Muse. It's super cute and it's also a keychain. So if we look on it, we can see where the analogous colors are. So this part's going to spin. So let's say you wanted to use green in your art today. Then if I look at the color wheel and I find green, I can see what is next to green. So anything inside of here, these are colors that are analogous to green or similar. If we stick with similar colors, whenever our paint blends today, it'll make a pretty color. If we accidentally used complementary, which are opposites, if they blend together, they make brown, which is good to know and helpful, but for today's exercise, it'd be nice to keep them all analogous so you keep those bright, similar colors. Analogous colors also help make your art feel more cohesive or connected and all as one piece. So I did one with blues recently, so I think I'm going to jump to the other side of the color wheel and use some warm colors today. So I'm going to choose some reds, oranges, and yellows, and those are side by side, so that means they'll look real nice together. All right, I'm going to start with my square brush because, believe it or not, it's very easy to make circles with a flat brush like this. With watercolor paint, we need a lot of water. You can use whatever colors. I don't even know which colors I have in my palette right now. I've got a red, I've got a yellow, I've got kind of this yellow ochre color, but I'll have to mix to make some oranges. For some reason, I don't have orange in my palette today. I'm going to start with one color, getting it really wet, so I'm kind of puddling it, so I have a lot to use. And then I'll just switch as I go. When I'm making a circle with my brush, what I'm doing is I'm just pivoting or I'm turning it. So I'm going to press it down and spin my brush in a circle. And then I can always go back and maybe go the other direction. This is also really good to practice for just brush control in general. Am I able to spin my brush in a nice neat circle? It's just a good thing to learn, of course, because you're getting better at your fine motor or your painting skills. While I've got red on my brush, I'm going to do a few of those circles. It's also good to change up the size of the circles. So these two are pretty similar. So I think if I want my art to look interesting, I'm going to make maybe a bigger one. Like that. And maybe a smaller one over here by just not spreading my brush as far. They do not have to be perfect circles. If they're kind of blob-like, that is just fine. Again, we're just making an exercise and thinking about where things go. So I've got a lot of red up here. I think I'm gonna do one more red kind of off to the side just to keep it balanced. It's not about symmetry, it's not about exact balance, but it's about visual balance. Do things seem even on all areas of the paper? I'm gonna wash my brush off and I'm gonna switch to kind of my yellow area. So I'm gonna grab some yellows. What I know will happen on my paint palette is my yellow will eventually hang out with my red, so I'll just kind of naturally move to orange whenever that happens. But I'm gonna go ahead and use some of my yellow. One of the fun things with painting with watercolor is when two areas are wet, then those colors are gonna naturally hang out and blend together. So by putting a yellow right next to my red here, it's possible those two are gonna bleed into each other and make some cool new colors. It's fun to kind of play with the way paint works. If you're a perfectionist like me, usually you don't want things to happen without your control. However, watercolor is good at letting you loosen up and have that happen even when you don't want it to. Oh, there goes my yellow. It's making some orange. So I'm gonna make a few more yellow circles. Again, changing the size and the location, letting them kind of run into each other because it can make some fun things happen on accident. One thing about composition, or about how we arrange our paper, is the idea of random. It's really hard to make real random. Us as human beings, we live in an orderly world where things are not very random. It's always kind of in order or with purpose. Now, we tend to make things even or symmetrical instead of random. Even when we say random, we end up kind of spreading things out or evenly spacing them. I was reminded of this. There's this TV show I haven't watched in a long time, called Numbers, where there's this mathematician and he works solving crime and all this fun stuff. And he talks about how things, asks people to stand in a random way in a room. And instead of actually standing in a random order, they stand evenly spaced from one another because that's just naturally what we think of as random, instead of having some things close together or some things far away. So truly random things are actually not evenly spaced. So that's why I'm trying to make some of my circles really close together and some further away from each other, because it's actually making it really random. And when things are more random, they're just more interesting to look at. But once again, even if it's random, it still needs to be balanced. At least I want it to be balanced. There are definitely some artists who don't balance things, and that's on purpose to really make us react to it. If you've ever seen an abstract artwork, and there might be a lot of reasons if you don't like it, but if something makes you feel uncomfortable, I want you to think about the balance of it. Think about if everything is all on one side, if the way it was made doesn't feel right. Sometimes it's about the composition, and a lot of times the artist will do that on purpose so that you have to stop and think and feel uncomfortable. That can be the purpose of it. Just like a writer might write something in a non-typical way to make you stop and think, or a songwriter might play a note you don't expect and it makes you uncomfortable. That's what artists will do with composition a lot. By making things not balanced, it kind of makes you feel unsettled because we're used to things being balanced and nicely arranged. So something to look for the next time you're observing some visual art. So I've got a lot of big circles here. I think I'm gonna move on to some small little circles soon. Maybe I'll do one more right in the middle here. The more you play with composition like this, the just more comfortable you're gonna get. One more over here. And then I'm gonna switch to really small circles. So I mentioned that we'll need both this brush and a smaller brush. So I'm gonna wash this one and set it off to the side. I'm trying to be better about not leaving my brushes in the water. That can break down the glue and the seal inside the brush, and then it's more likely to fall apart sooner. You'll notice my brushes have seen better days, so I'm trying to be better about not leaving them sitting in the water cup. Now that I've got my smaller brush, I can do the same type of circles, but just smaller. So I'm just gonna actually draw a physical circle with my brush, now that I don't have the square top of it, and then try to fill in the rest of this area. Just to give you one more kind of reference, I was reading a poem by Ada Limon with a book club at my church. We like to read a lot of creative books, and the book club is mostly full of artists, visual artists, musical artists, writers, musicians, all that stuff. So we were reading this poetry book, and there's a line break that was really surprising and confusing. And it was, this alarm was going off, or like a like a morning alarm on the bedside table or something, and the line break really confused us, and we kind of were wondering maybe that was done on purpose, because if you've ever woken up to an alarm going off, it's very unsettling because you don't know where you are, you don't know, what's going on, who's there. It's just such a weird feeling to wake up and something unusual is happening or sounding, and it's just so cool what artists can do to make us feel a certain way when we hear or read or see something. So just kind of keep that in mind with your balance. If you want that unsettling effect, then you can do that in your painting by making it not as balanced. So it's just kind of cool how you can really change the way people react to your artwork that way. I'm feeling pretty good about my balance. I've got a little more space at the bottom than I do at the top. However, when we add our lines and designs, then we can also change the composition when we do that as well. But I just realized I had a really straight line of dots, so I'm just adding one more dot, maybe there and one there, just to make sure it's a little more random like I was talking about. If you have a lot of patience and you can just wait for it to dry, grab a cup of tea or coffee, go ahead and wait for it to dry. Otherwise, I'm going to get my hairdryer out and dry it a little faster. All right, now that my painting is dry, I'm going to be thinking about lines and patterns. I tend to bring this little book around with me. It was handmade. I bought it from an artist at a market once, and I use it just to brainstorm and sketch and all that. And most recently, I was brainstorming different patterns and lines to put in practices like this. So I kind of went through and tried to play with as many different lines, patterns, and designs that I could think of. That way, when I'm doing an exercise like this, I can just reference my patterns and lines in here instead of just sitting and wondering. However, it can be really freeing to just see what happens with the lines and designs you make. This is a lot like something called Zentangling. So if you don't have ideas in your head or you're feeling lost, just search Zentangling or line designs and you'll come up with hundreds and thousands and probably maybe millions of different patterns like this. They get more and more complicated as you look, and so just pick ones that are good for you. But I'm just going to have this kind of out while I draw so that I can think and see different patterns that I might want to use. So nice thing, it doesn't matter if it's upside down or not because it does the same thing. All right, then I'm going to be using my Micron pens. They're my favorite. So Micron brand, they come in different sizes. The smallest one I have is a 005. The 01 and the 03 are probably going to be best for me today. They're a little bit bigger, but they're not too big. I have a 05 and a 08 as well, but those are just really big lines. So I think I'm going to stick with these today. I'm going to do my smaller line first, and then I could always go over and make some bigger if I want to. So this is another part of composition. You just want to play with line and evenly fill it, but not everything needs a line. So sometimes what I like to do is make my lines not cover up a whole circle. So they might start that way. I think I'm going to just start with a simple just lines, and I'm going to make some rows of random lines on this circle. However, again, I just want to keep things random. I'm not going to fill the whole circle, and maybe even I'll go off the circle if that's even allowed. You get to make the rules today. So make those kind of lines. Just creates kind of visual interest over in this spot of the drawing. Then maybe since I've done straight lines, I think I might do something curved. It's good to kind of vary the way the lines move. Maybe I'll have some little circles over here. So kind of nearby, because again, I'm varying it, but maybe I'll do some more straight lines over here. So I'll have some round circles over in this area. I'm almost creating more circles with my design. So there's a circle of circles, a circle of lines. It just kind of makes the line patterns feel like they're connected to the circles I've already made. Sometimes with these designs, I like to just kind of do some scribble lines. So kind of just some random circles that go around. That just looks interesting. Again, it's kind of sticking with my theme of circles. Maybe I'll do some spirals. Maybe I'll do some longer lines. The nice thing with lines is you can really make them look like a shadow or shading if you wanted to. If you did cross hatching or hatching, if you've heard of that, it's a drawing technique to make things look like they're shaded by using line instead of color or value. So if you've played with that before, that can be a fun thing to do. But I'm just going to jump back around and think of other things to do. I could repeat my patterns. So if I choose too many different patterns, it'll feel kind of chaotic. So now that I have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different patterns, I might stick to those 5 and just repeat them in different places so it feels cohesive and all connected. All right, I kind of like that amount of lines. If I do too many, again, it'll get kind of busy. So I think I'm gonna stop mine there. I hope that you've found some fun designs, things you wanna add. And I hope this was helpful. I'm gonna go ahead and sign it. I just like to use my little initial signature, AW, usually in the bottom right, but you as the artist, you could put it inside a circle, you could kind of hide it, or you could choose a different spot. It's just nice to be consistent. And that's the end of that practice. So I've practiced composition, the way things are arranged. I used analogous colors, colors that are similar together, and then I've used a lot of line and pattern to create variation and make it look interesting. I hope you have fun with this. This would make a great bookmark design if you had a long skinny piece of paper. This could be fun on a card to give to someone. Really, you can use it all year round, or maybe even use colors that match the holiday you want to give the card to. There's endless options. If you did like this, go ahead and give this video a like and subscribe so you can see my other tutorials and practices. I'm also on Instagram showing my different art there at Alyssa Whetstone Art. So I hope to see you around, and I hope this was helpful.